Hey everyone, so today we're going to cover some practical strategies that we can use to load the lower trunk muscles, which are essentially those muscles that will connect the rib cage to the pelvis. But we're going to load these muscles in the transverse plane using some medicine ball throw variations. But we're going to view these strategies through two different lenses. Firstly, we're going to load these muscles through the entire contractile spectrum, so allowing them to express more eccentric behavior as we manage forces, and then reverse that through the concentric behavior. Okay, so loading them through that entire contractile spectrum. But to do that, we need to allow for dissociation capacity between the ribcage and the pelvis, where the pelvis is maintaining a position towards one direction in the transverse plane, while allowing the rib cage then to rotate in the opposing direction to really get that lengthening and shortening contraction through these lower trunk muscles. And then secondly, we're going to progress to working on restoring or developing the elastic and isometric capacities of these lower trunk muscles, where we can manage forces quickly without having to sink into an eccentric contraction and then reverse that into the concentric phase. Okay, just like any other muscle, we want them to have the capacity to manage forces quickly, manage perturbations quickly. And again, same thought process with the first point. We still want to allow for that dissociation capacity between the ribcage and pelvis as we're developing those isometric and elastic qualities of the lower trunk muscles. Okay, because essentially we always want to, generally through a rehab process, we want to always improve the capacity of the system to manage forces first before we work on producing higher level, more maximal force output. Okay, so with these strategies, we're going to keep the intensity quite moderate and focus on the management of forces, the management of perturbations, as opposed to high levels of force output. Okay, so this first one is a seated front-facing medicine ball scoop throw, and there's a few key points with this one. So we're going to start in a seated position with a block being squeezed between our knees to prevent the femurs from sliding forward and back and creating a rotation in the pelvis, which will then reduce that dissociation relative to the rib cage, which we want to try and prevent. We're then going to throw the ball from the side against the wall, but the key here is that we're going to catch the ball early in the range of motion, where our rib cage is only slightly rotated in that direction, and then we're holding onto the ball as we rotate. And this is going to create some eccentric load through the trunk muscles before we rotate in the opposing direction again to throw the ball against the wall again. Okay, so the early catch here reduces the momentum of the ball and gives the trunk muscles time to work eccentrically and then to reverse that then concentrically with the throw again. Okay, so we have the option here of rotating the head with the ribcage in the same direction. That'll help facilitate some more ribcage rotation, but it's really based on how the client feels with each one. Okay, and so the key here again is keeping the squeeze between of the block between the knees to reduce that pelvic rotation, so we can get that ribcage moving relative to the pelvis. And so we also have the option of doing this in standing. So we're nice and close to the wall, front facing, with the right limb in front and the left behind. Okay, and this right limb in front of the left, this facilitates a left-sided rotation of the pelvis. So as the rib cage rotates to the right, we're getting that eccentric load through the trunk muscles and expressing that dissociation between the rib cage and the pelvis. And you can also see here that we have a nice bit of space between the legs, and this gives us a bigger base of support. So we're not necessarily worrying about our balance here. Okay, and in terms of foot pressure, again, we're not worrying about our balance. We're not trying to challenge our balance here. So we don't want a great deal of pressure just on one leg, but we want 60% of the pressure on the forward leg and 40% of the pressure on the rear leg. And another key thing here is that as we're catching the ball and rotating the rib cage to the right, we want to think about keeping that right knee reaching forward. Okay, and that right knee reaching forward, again, will reduce the chances of that right femur deviating in the same direction to the right. So it'll drag the pelvis to the right with it. So we want to reduce that from happening. So that right reaching of the knee forward will help reduce that tendency. And it ultimately helps to maintain that dissociation and allow us to express that eccentric load through the lower trunk muscles. And in the next video here, we're facing the side with the outside right leg forward again. So again, it rotates that pelvis to the left. But the key here with this position is that it requires a relatively early catch of the ball, where we're catching in a position where we're not expressing as much dissociation of the rib cage relative to the pelvis. So again, it gives us time, it gives us more time to catch the ball, rotate the rib cage to the right, gives those muscles time, the lower trunk muscles time to manage those forces eccentrically before reversing that and working concentrically. Okay, And in terms of sets and reps, we like to accumulate at least 30 to 45 seconds of work, so the repetitive throwing, but all while maintaining quality. Okay, and we're going to repeat that for 3 sets. And now we're progressing towards developing those more elastic and isometric qualities through the lower trunk muscles, okay, which builds their capacity to quickly manage perturbations and forces. And we're starting with the seated version on the left, where we'll want to add more speed to the throw here and also catch the ball later in the range of motion through the rib cage. Okay, so we're delaying the catch here. So we're essentially already expressing that dissociation between the rib cage that's rotated right and the pelvis that's rotated left. So we're catching the ball in that dissociation, quickly snapping that ball back to the wall. Okay, so we're not giving the trunk muscles here the opportunity or the time to sink back into that eccentric phase and give them time to build muscle tension and then reverse that momentum of the ball during the concentric phase. Okay, and you can see here how there's much more of a short and snappy movement here because we're trying to express that elastic isometric behavior, quickly reverse that momentum to develop those qualities through the trunk muscles. And then again, it's the same idea here with the standing strategy on the right. We're nice and close to the wall, right leg forward, really reaching that knee forward as we catch 60% of the weight in the right leg, 40% in the left. A nice quick snappy movement of the rib cage, catching the ball late, where we're already expressing that dissociation, so we can really challenge the elastic quality, the isometric qualities of those lower trunk muscles. So this is a really nice way to view your lower trunk muscle training, where essentially during the early phases of rehabilitation, we're focusing on low load, low force, low speed strategies, and then building and progressing towards higher load, higher speed strategies, where we're moving from restoring more concentric and eccentric capacities to more isometric and elastic qualities of the trunk muscles. Okay. And to do that, we want to maintain the capacity to dissociate the rib cage from the pelvis, okay? And then another key concept as well is as we begin to progress even further into rehab, where we're focusing on more higher levels of force output, producing forces, higher levels of force, that's when the segmental behavior will shift from allowing the rib cage and pelvis to move in opposing directions to then allowing them to move in the same direction, so we can concentrate that force in one direction. Okay, so that's a key concept there in terms of our progression through the rehab plan. We want to initially focus on low speed, low force strategies and then progress towards high speed, high force strategies. But we need to understand the segmental behavior that will coexist with those strategies.